Hello, how's it going, everybody? Hello, welcome in. I hope you guys have been enjoying the Live Coders Conference. Today we're going to be talking about some game design. I'm going to tell you guys some secrets to game design, my own secrets. So what we're going to do is I'm going to reserve a little bit of time at the end for some questions. So if you guys have any questions, just keep them in mind as you go along. And I'm going to go through my slides pretty quickly today, but they're going to be online, available afterwards too. So you'll be able to go through it again. So if you guys aren't familiar with me, I'm Instafluff. I stream on Twitch. We do coding. We've been building bots to play games and all sorts. And with that, this is game design as a science. Instafluff simple secrets to making games fun. So why listen to this guy? Who the heck is Instafluff? Apparently, this guy has been making games since like the 90s. Holy crap, he really is 88 years old. So I've been making games quite a while. I've ran a game development club in college and at work and been making games ever since. So I took a break from it for a little bit to do some startups. But yeah, I've made games on the console, on the PC. I've made Science Surfing on the Xbox. And then one of my other games that I've made was called Hatch. It got to #1 on the App Store, which was pretty cool. And lately, I've been working on a bunch of Twitch integrated games lately through Pixel Plush Games with the amazing artist Maya Insane. Check out Maya Insane if you haven't already. So with that, these are some of the things that are also involved in making a game successful. It's really hard to make a game successful, but game design is a core part of it. So that's what we're going to talk about. These are all the things that we're not going to talk about. So remember and keep in mind that there's a lot of things involved in making games successful, not just game design, but game design is important. So let's get to it. I hope you're ready. Da-na-na-na. I'm going to give you guys some tools to start and kind of analyze and understand what game design is really about. And one of the ways that you can think about it is from an amazing professor who actually is from Carnegie Mellon. That's my alma mater. From Carnegie Mellon, he's a professor on entertainment technology, and he developed the concept of 4 pillars. The 4 pillars are aesthetics, story. Wait, I'm doing this backwards. I'm a terrible weatherman. But aesthetics, story, mechanics, technology. And if you could do all 4 of these really well, you'd be doing better than the AAA games. It's very hard, right? It's hard to do everything right. But the reason you have these 4 pillars is if you can focus on even just one and do that really well, then that can help you make a game really successful. So for example, aesthetics are the games that we talk about and describe in terms of how beautiful that game is, or like how amazing that game looked. If you think about the games like Shadow of Colossus, Nier Automata, Persona 5, they're very stylized, right? And when we describe them to our friends, we're like, you have to check out this game, it looks amazing. Those are aesthetics games. We talk about stories. When we talk about games in terms of what the game was about, those are the games that do story really well. And so things like Life is Strange, The Last of Us, Mass Effect, all of these games, even like text-based adventure games, those are the games that do story really well, like really well, and so well that they don't have to worry about some of the other things. And I mean, AAA titles tend to also have really good graphics too, and so you can kind of combine both. But that's another pillar. Technology are the games that push the edge boundaries of what's possible in an experience. Right now, the way that we look at and interact with most video games is through keyboard and mice, but mobile games kind of push those boundaries. Beat Saber, for instance, with VR and AR push those boundaries. Those games push technology to its limit. Or like DDR when it came out is kind of like a new technology game. Pokemon Go, for instance, a lot of those games push technologies. And then finally, this is my favorite, mechanics and gameplay is where you can also innovate. And you see a lot of indie games be able to innovate around gameplay, like Portal. Portal, I think it used to be, the prototype was called Vernacular Drop. Or Tetris, or even when Grand Theft Auto 3 just came out, and it introduced open world gameplay just like on the mainstream for the first time ever. That kind of thing really changes how we interact with games. And so those are the 4 pillars. I want to give you guys one more tool to think about how to approach game design and games. And so another way, the Sid Meier, he's kind of like the expert in simulation games and Civilization. He talks about games as a series of choices. And the researchers on game design in Finland break it down into just 2 things. They're like, a game is made up of the actions that a player can do and the space within the game to make it. So it's like actions in space make a game. Makes sense, right? It's like this is what you can do, and this is the possibilities or places that you're able to do those actions. And so you got it? Got it? Game design, action spaces, 4 pillars, and the series of choices. So to think about games, I think we pretty much decided that games are art, right? There's no question anymore. Games are art. But what's the science behind it? And how do we define games as good or bad? How do we rate or review a game in terms of game design? And so to do that, we got Goethe. Goethe's 3 questions. Not Goethe, not Goth. I remember I figured out how to pronounce his name properly, and I've been pronouncing names, and then I'm a streamer, so I pronounce names really terribly anyway. But apparently his name is actually pronounced Goethe. He's a German philosopher, and he proposes these 3 questions. He says, what was the artist trying to do with the art? How well did he accomplish that goal? And was it worth doing? Was it even worth the artist's time and effort and energy and resources to make that piece of art? And so what I'm going to do is to modify it, iterate a little bit, and propose the game design version of Goethe's 3 questions. Or at least, no, this is the way to think about it is more in terms of like the player. So it's not just about how well the game was designed, but how well the player will perceive it and be able to play through the game design. And so the game ultimately is all about the player, right? It's not about who designed it. We're trying to let the player experience the game. So what we're trying to look at is, what is the player trying to achieve in our game? How easily can they do it, and is it even worth it? Like if something like if you remember in MMO games, it's like if a piece of armor only gives you like +1 attribute to strength or something, they're not gonna grind like 10 hours for it, right? They're gonna be like, what's the best armor? What's a better one? And so stuff like that is a way to kind of look at your game design as well. It's like if you have these actions and spaces, which actions are going to be more rewarding for the player? And so to test it out, I'm proposing a scientific method for game design. Kind of like the all of science is pretty much all about failure, right? It's like, how many times can we fail and prove out hypotheses wrong until we land on a hypothesis that actually is right? How many experiments can we do, and how quickly can we do them? So the scientific game method in terms of game design could be like iterating on game design, iterating on the gameplay, on the mechanics, and that's the way I like to do it. You could iterate on the art, you could iterate on any of the 4 pillars, but this is my philosophy behind games. I think that I like to focus on the core mechanic, because if you have a good core mechanic that's fun by itself without anything else, that's like the mechanic part of the 4 pillars, then we can attach arts, we can attach story, we can attach technology to it that make it better and improve it. But it's much harder in my mind to take a story that's set, or take some sort of technology, or take some sort of art style, and then see if we can come up with a gameplay that matches that art style or matches that story. And so double your frame rate. Oh man. and so that's why I like to start with mechanics and gameplay, and then iterate as many times as I can. And then the third part of my philosophy and what I value about game design is if you can do it with other people. Like, it's the reasoning behind like leaderboards, or the reason behind how speedrunning is much more fun if you're not just doing it by yourself, but you're able to share that speedrun with others and be like, hey, check it out. Like, I did something cool. I can beat this game in like 5 minutes. Can anybody else do it? This is really neat. And can we make it into a collaborative effort to figure out how we can beat a game even faster than ever before thought possible? And so together is always better, I think. But, everyone has different preferences. So we're going to go through one together, and then maybe this will kind of serve as a template for you guys to be able to also go through and think about game design in terms of this, like the scientific game design method, right? So what I'm proposing is, what if we turn the painting game into a multiplayer turn-based game, right? It's like, what if we did and made art together? Like we could draw a circle, someone could draw a circle and then pass it over to the next person. They could draw eyes, they could draw noses, they could draw horns, they could draw a unicorn, who knows what. But that could be fun, right? So how do we prove this out? Here we go. Let's set up an experiment. We could build a drawing app. We could set up networking, convince all of our best friends to play test it, and then see if they find it fun, and then ship it, right? I'm just kidding. that's probably very, very much more of an effort, right? So we're gonna start over. We're gonna do a build a drawing app. Just kidding again. I'm such a troll. So, do you remember when I told you guys about the game design of 4 pillars and everything, and then we finished with the Goethe's 3 questions? That's kind of like the theme for today. What if we propose the hypothesis testing of Goethe's 3 questions? Like, what is the experiment trying to achieve? How easily can we do it? And is it even worth doing? Like if the cost to experiment and prove out a hypothesis and build a prototype and build a game is going to take you 2 years to do it, is it really worth it? Is there a smaller version of that gameplay that we can prototype in like a day? That's the whole point behind hackathons, behind game jams. It's like, how can we just like prove out hypotheses? And then even if they don't work, that's great. That's a successful game jam because we tried a game idea, concept, or gameplay. And then if it worked, wow, holy cow, we did it. If it didn't work, hey, we only spent 24, 48 hours, 72 hours to experiment and make a game. And even if it's not a fun game, you still made a game and you've made that hypothesis and proved it out. And so these are the 3 questions. So we're gonna try this again. Turn-based painting is a fun game mechanic. How about this? What if we turn it not digital? This is called paper prototyping. It's kind of incredible because we can actually do a lot of game prototyping without writing any single lines of code. And so what you can do is you can be like, I'm gonna get a piece of paper. Maybe we could get all fancy. We can get an iPad and then we can like draw a mug on it. Maybe we could get even fancier because we can be like, hey, we're gonna make and iterate on like art on a mug recipe. Anyway, so we could get a piece of paper and then we can draw a circle on it and then hand it to a friend and then be like, hey, draw something here, and then hand it back to me. And then if you think that's fun and it's promising, then we can be like, all right, I think there might be something here. Maybe there's something that's fun about this game mechanic. And maybe it's because it's on pieces of paper. Maybe it's just the idea that it's doing this multiplayer game. We don't know, but this will at least verify whether or not it's even fun. And so this is the way that I think we can turn game design into a scientific method. And the main key takeaway that I like you guys to do from this is to just try it. It's like we're so afraid to try different things or try and attempt and learn new skills or try even game design and learn about making game because we're not going to be able to make it into a AAA title. And one of the things that we used to do, a very first thing that we would propose for anybody that would come into our game creation society, our game creation club, would be to propose that they try just making and remaking a game like Pac-Man or Tetris or some of like the classics. And so many things that you can learn from that. It just comes from just like trying it and making your own version. There's so many things where we've had new game creation society members come in and be like, I got the greatest idea. We're gonna make an MMO, but it's gonna be like the greatest art and it's gonna have all of these selections of like different types of Pokemon. It's gonna be like a Pokemon MMO, but it's going to be like World of Warcraft and it's gonna be so much better because you can have so many people in there at the same time. And there's a lot of complexity to that, right? And we don't even know if it's fun. So how do we break it down into smaller chunks that make it fun? And so this is my hero of game design. He says, just do it. All you gotta do is just do it. And it's not about just doing it for like 2 years to make a prototype. Remember the Goethe's questions? But it's like, how do we scale it down and iterate on game design really, really small and easily and prove out hypotheses one at a time. Just one at a time. And that's, we love it, right? It's like one at a time, one day at a time, one step at a time. And then sure enough, before you know it, you're like, oh, wow, we went through like 100 different game prototypes and I think we landed on one. It's pretty fun. Here's a secret. Here's another, I'm gonna reveal one more secret to you guys before the end of our talk, because did you know that some of the greatest games were games that were canned and they delayed it? They're like, we're gonna revisit this idea. It seems kind of cool. And that game, that category includes Pokemon, includes Halo, like some of the greatest games that were the biggest hits were games where people said, hey, this game, let's not work on it. I don't think it's good enough. And then they started working on other ones, and then they're like, wait a minute, that Halo game was kind of neat. Maybe we should go back to it and see if it's worth it. I think there's something there, and our brain keeps going back to it, and over time it'll always ring back. And you're like, oh man, you know that game about collecting bugs and then like using them to battle each other and moves? Like maybe we should go back to it, and then all of a sudden we get a game like Pokemon, right? So that's what we gotta do it. What I'd like to end on here before we get to questions is, in terms of game design, we think about games as like one of the reasons I actually went into doing more like startups and left the game industry for a while was because I was thinking that maybe games don't really, like I wanted to have a bigger impact on something that's more direct. Like I want to build technologies that can directly value or like bring and benefit people. But then something about games always drew me back. I was like, what is it about games that keeps me interested and keeps me thinking about how people can experience things differently and can understand and have different stories, all of that. Holy cram! Welcome in everybody from Coding Garden. How are you doing? Holy smokes, we're talking about game design. And I'll share these slides again, so then you'll be able to find them. Actually, here, the slides are actually available on this link. Game design is a science. There we go. That should be the link if you want to go through and look through these slides again. But what I'd like to end on is that games do have impact. It turns out the next generations coming up can learn a lot of things, not just in terms of like reaction times, but the way that they empathize with other people, the way that they perceive the world and experience the world, and the way that we connect with each other, with other people from other backgrounds, other experiences, all of that. The best way to tell those stories is with games, because even though like movies and books are a really good tool for telling stories, games are such a direct experience for them that like it lasts for a lifetime. And so when we design these games, we can keep that in mind. And with that, I have some recommendations for books. So as always, you can check out these books again anytime. So I have these slides online, so you'll be able to look back in this. But these are some of my favorite books in terms of game design that I recommend if you guys are serious about trying a game. There's the Ludumdare Game Jam that happens every 6 months, twice a year, will happen again, I think, in October. And so I encourage you guys to join in. And so these are some of the books that you can read. And with that, we can go and answer some questions. Does anybody have any questions about game design? Yeah, game dev is amazing. It's so fun. It's what brought me back. It's like, how do we, I think like experiences and everything was what really drove me to do game design or like join the game industry in the first place. Is like one of the things I worked on at Microsoft was Kinect. I saw Kinect as a technology. It used to be called Project Natal, and I was like, we can change how people interact with games, and it really did. It's like Kinect was one of the first times that you could see kids and grandmas all playing together, just like dancing in front of a TV. And then what's even more surprising was from that generation of new kids coming up, just interacting with Kinect, they would just naturally try and talk to a TV as if it would understand and try and do voice commands. And so like that's like a direct impact of what games can do and can inspire for people. And so let's see. Okay, are there any questions about game design? I'm looking through questions. Someone asked earlier, do you have to be good at coding for game design? Nope. So that's the thing with paper prototyping. Remember how we did the paper prototyping for seeing if multiplayer turn-based painting games could be fun? So the cool thing about games and getting into games is that you don't even have to know how to code to make a fun game and come up with a good concept, and you can iterate on it with paper. Like that's kind of what board games are before we had computers. And so games, And there's a lot of other things around game design and the mechanics and how to think about games in terms of rules and the universe, like chess, for instance, and everything. But I think like the four pillars are kind of like the best ways for at least most of us to understand video games and think about it and think about which might be valuable and what players like to do. Can I have an invisible shirt too? Yeah, maybe. Maybe. Question: what advice would you give to someone new into game design to get them started? So one of the things that I really recommend if anybody here hasn't tried making a game but would like to or are interested is to really just try making a very simple one. Some of the classics, like even making a Pac-Man game, like the classic Pac-Man, it might not sound really fun, but once you make something that's your own, and even if it's just like a classic game, like Tetris, that like the things that you can learn from it and how you can start programming AI, start programming how to render things as a UI and user interface and player actions and input, all of that combined together builds up so many different tools that apply not even just to games but to all these other technology fields. And so what I recommend is really just trying something and trying small, building small. I know we all have like really grand ideas for a lot of video games, and those are great. And we should always keep that in mind because it'll always keep iterating and refining in the back of our heads. But if we can start smaller and see if we can break down those big ideas into smaller chunks, then we can make 100 different games out of it along the way as we build our game engine, as we build our tool sets for level editing or character editing. As we build all of those out, we can build multiple games along the way. And that's the way that I like to approach projects too. Not just games, but projects in general. Does game building require specific math skills? Those you can learn along the way. A lot of 2D games might require math skills like doing calculations for physics or for like rendering stuff onto a 2D coordinate. But there are different types of games. So some games like story games or novel games, those games might not actually need a lot of like math, and those are still fun. And so it really depends on what kind of game you like to try and build. So yeah, start smaller and think bigger. And oh yeah, game jams. So there are some big game jams like Ludum Dare or the Global Game Jam, but there's actually a whole ton of game jams going on all the time. And so if you even just like search online for game jams that are going on right now, just it's like don't worry about failing, because the biggest thing that we like to do in our streams is to push our boundary. We talk about comfy, right? But comfy to me is how do we push our comfort zone a little bit at a time, just like one step every day until we become comfortable playing the piano, playing guitars, coding in a new language, building and trying a cloud-based thing or learning AI. It's like, how do we push our comfort zone a little bit so that we're not like overwhelmed, but we learn a little bit more eventually until a month later, a year later, now all of a sudden we're like, oh, hey, check it out. I'm an AI programmer all of a sudden after a year. Or check it out. I've built my own website and it can do content management. Oh, look, I wrote an entire book with this cool story and all these character development. I learned how to draw. Like all of those things it starts one step at a time. And I think that's really important. And especially with game design, it's like, how do we break it down into smaller steps? And that also helps us kind of measure along the way. So yeah. Oh, thank you, Dr. Argus. Yeah, there you go. See, there's a lot of game jams that happen all the time. It's really more like, how do we pick one and see if we can try something? So yeah, applies to all coding problems. Yeah, minimum, and then you try it. So we talk about like MVPs, right? It's like the MVP is like the minimum viable product, and that totally applies to games too. It's like, how do we bring it down to a core essence? And that's why I like to iterate on the core mechanics. But if you're iterating with like AR or VR games, that's a little different. That's like, you do need to work with those technologies, but that's why there's the core 4 pillars. If you've missed this, here we go. Hold on. Let's revisit this. There's 4 pillars: aesthetics, mechanics, story, and technology. And aesthetics is kind of like to review, is like the games that are super pretty and pretty to look at. And those are like the graphical kind of things or stylized things. Those are the games that we look at and remember in terms of very visual games. Stories are the ones that we remember in terms of like this was what the game was about. Or technology is like new technologies like DDR, Beat Saber, Pokemon Go, like touch screens. All of those games push the limits of technology. And then this is my favorite, gameplay. And so if you can do even any one of those and focus on making that good, that makes a good game. And then after that, you can do all sorts of other things. You got to work on business and marketing and everything. But really, just in terms of game design and making a fun game that you like to play and other people might like to play, that's what I recommend. Do you think there are specific programming languages that are essential to know? Nope. I know that like even now, especially, there's a lot of tools that you can use that don't even require you learning a programming language. Like there's one called MakeCode that you can do, and you can now build bots in Minecraft using MakeCode. That's just like graphical languages. It's not like a syntactical programming language. And so tools like that I think are actually the future of game design as well. And so in the future, more and more people are going to be able to make tools, make products, make apps, and even games without having to know exactly like what keywords are there in a programming language. And so for me personally, I've built a lot of games on C#, and nowadays I build a lot of it on JavaScript. But really, it's like the tools are out there, and you can find whichever language you think kind of vibes with you and that you like to build in. And so, yeah. Oh, one last question. We got Katoli. What's the part that you most enjoy when you're developing and designing a game? My favorite part is seeing other people play a game and enjoy it. And I think that goes for a lot of developers. A lot of game developers will find and make a game, and then they see other people playing it, and they're like, wow, that was really rewarding. And so to wrap up, if you guys would like to see more of stuff like this, then I'm actually live on Twitch every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It's easy to remember because it spells out WTFS, when the fluff streams. And if you want to check out some of our Pixel Plush games, I do highly recommend going over there. We have a lot of stream focused games right now, but we're actually building out some games that are not just playable on stream. And my GitHub projects, there's a whole ton. And then if you guys want to check out my website, I need to update it more, but I have that. And so with that, thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the Live Coders Conference. You guys are amazing for being here, and thank you again for the raid Coding Garden. All right, I think we're gonna go back to Liz now. Thank you so much, and happy Saturday.